Are you feeling in the cross currents of remote work? One minute it's the dream, the next is about going back into the office or a question about productivity, and really the whole premise for it altogether. It's confusing, right? If you're trying to really understand the real trends and what some of the data is saying, then this video is definitely for you. I dive into topics like this every single week, whether it's portfolio careers, contracting, independent consulting. So if this is something that you're interested in, make sure to like and subscribe to this channel in order to get more videos like this. And if you don't know who I am already, my name is Michael Tabirade. I'm an independent consultant and founder of the consultancy, The Mastery Group. And I essentially help people decode the changing world in order for them to flourish in the career that they're looking to create and build. Look, if it feels like the goalposts are changing all the time when it comes to remote work, you're not imagining this. You know, 1 minute it's, oh yes, remote work is the best thing ever. And the next minute, CEOs are calling people in droves to come back to the office. Now, I'm going to be pulling out some statistics from Standout CV, and they state that 64% of CEOs expect their full workforce to go back to the office by 2026. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, is your productivity truly valued? Is your well-being truly valued? This whole thing about remote work has been a contentious element for a number of years since COVID because there are many people jumping into roles because it is remote or because it's hybrid or whatever it may be. And so this video is going to shed some light on what the stats are saying. What are some of the things that we're not necessarily thinking about and what we can think about moving forward in terms of taking actionable steps. Now, we all know the job market is very difficult at the moment, and there are many drivers that are making this very difficult. However, I've put together a CV template that should help you at least increase your visibility and give you a fighting chance when it comes to applying for different roles. So if this is something you're interested in, then feel free to click on the link below. So what's really going on? Why do things feel so unsettled? Well, the reality is the new normal is still under construction. COVID really generated this whole great reset, this great resignation, this great new way of doing things. And we're still acclimatizing to the huge effects that COVID employed upon us. Now, roughly 44% of us are doing some sort of remote work, and 28% of that is hybrid work. So there's a push and pull effect when it comes to this remote working situation. 78% of employees say that actually remote working has improved their work-life balance, whereas 71% has said that it has made no change to their productivity or at least increased it. Of course, I put that stat at the beginning about CEOs, but employers, the actual organizations, 40% of them are wanting all their workforce to go back into the office and expect a full 5-day return. This, of course, is creating some level of tension and disconnect when it comes to the workforce. Secondly, technology is undoubtedly changing the way we do things, whether this is using Google Meet, Teams, AI to help us do note-taking or facilitate some sort of workshop functionality. There are many different things that we can do now that we didn't necessarily adopt previously before. So generally, it allows us to work anywhere. But it's not just where we work, it's also changing how we do things. Now, the World Economic Forum warns us that AI and automation is going to fundamentally change the way we do things by 2030 at least. And therefore, those things that we thought were uniquely human are now being impacted. This is not about factory workers. This is about knowledge workers, those people doing the 9-to-5s in the corporate job or on their desktop or their laptops or whatever it may be. It's all going to be impacted. And of course, with this in mind, this creates a huge, well, will my job be next? Pluxee UK and Factorial HR talk about the fact that there are different things to take into consideration, such as isolation, burnout, and many other things connected to the fact that we have been working remotely. And therefore, there are certain challenges and pain points which are directly and indirectly affecting us and have been doing so over a long period of time. Now, of course, I've seen this within the contracting space and the independent consulting space, especially being a solopreneur, so to speak. And there can be some real challenges where it's difficult to differentiate between work and home, always being on as opposed to having a dynamic relationship between working and resting. So in essence, it doesn't account for the complexities that come with remote working. Now, I'm not necessarily anti-remote working. In fact, I love remote working. It's been a benefit for me. However, I'm more clued onto the disbenefits that can be provided through remote working as well. And so it's trying to give a balanced argument to and from, because we've seen many people talk about, yes, remote work is great, this, that, X, Y, and Z, but we don't necessarily hear the other side as well. If we don't address some of these issues, it means that we drift into a space where your ability to flourish, your well-being, your sense of identity is going to be challenged quite heavily without any solutions to help support you on this transition. We don't want to move into a space where there is chronic stress, there is continuous burnout, and actually you're working longer hours. I know for myself, I remember saying this to my parents the other day, I'm working longer hours. And some people may say boo-hoo, but let's look at the UK, for example. Productivity has been, over the last couple of months or so, close to zero. Of course, that's fluctuated up and down. But then when you speak to people on the ground, they're saying they're working longer hours, it's stressful, all of this kind of stuff there. And that's because there are less jobs and there are more people doing more stuff. Now, of course, that is one factor towards it as well. But another factor is centered around the fact that if you are working remotely, yes, you may have found ways to multitask and do the washing and possibly watch your show, whatever it may be, but you are definitely doing things for longer because the opportunity to just do things and the lack of separation between communication with people on a coffee break or whatever it may be is not present. And so there is something to be said about blurred lines and the lack of delineation. This is not for everybody. This is for people who vibe with what I'm saying and are going through this stuff also. There's also another side to this. If your organization is not completely remote and there are some people going into the office, however, you may not be going into the office, there is something known as proximity bias. Potentially, you may be undervalued based on the fact that people don't really see you, like physically, and therefore, rightly or wrongly, your opportunities are minimized for whatever reason. From an employer's standpoint, there is something to be said about culture. Culture is made up of a whole bunch of things: behavior, policy, process, procedures, leadership. And looking at leadership, specifically management, managers may not necessarily have the opportunity to develop a real relationship with certain employees, or better yet, they may not necessarily understand the nuances of how to develop that culture cohesively with a team. And therefore, they suffer, creating environments that don't necessarily provide the right level of challenge and or support. Now, of course, you can develop a relationship, but there is a nuance that exists when you meet someone physically. You can sense their vibe. You can see how they react more succinctly in certain situations, and then you can act more accordingly. And of course, that works better for those who are on their journey of developing their leadership skills using things like emotional intelligence. And of course, this video is not just looking at the remote element, it's also looking at the technology and AI element. For many of us who haven't necessarily taken the opportunity to learn more about AI, for the employers who are not taking the integration of AI seriously, we are definitely at risk of losing a competitive edge. Now, AI as a tool, how it's used, determines the trajectory of how successful a person and or company may be. And so there's something to be said about understanding how this technology impacts the market and what you need to do to have a competitive edge as an employee or employer so that you're not left behind. Now, of course, all this change may make it seem like there's not much we can really do. We're either going down the remote route, or we're either going to be in a situation where AI and technology is going to take over and replace all our jobs. But depending on who you are and how you think, it could create opportunity. And that's what I really want to push in my videos. The opportunity that comes from what may seem like a new chaotic normal. So we need to think about, how do we design a future where you fit in and you still have the opportunity to thrive? Now, depending on your thoughts, you may be thinking to yourself, remote work is the way forward. And if that works for you, for your setup, I know it works for me, then go ahead and continue doing that. But experience has also taught me that when you meet people face to face, even if you are an independent consultant, there is an edge that you have. In a world where it's full of technology, AI, automation, and the human dynamic is kind of being pushed aside, the edge is leaning into that human element. It is then our ability to get out of this lazy state or can't be bothered state and all this kind of stuff there. Stuff that I know I am in myself that positions you differently. When I talk about the job market and I talk about opportunities in the job market, even though it's crazy and dire right now, what is helping me is having those conversations and not just relying on tech to just apply for things or all of that kind of jazz there. So there needs to be some time carved out for that. Not even time, the energy, the activity management in order for that to be a thing. So for me, in my mind, it makes sense for there to be some level of a hybrid arrangement that enables people to work remotely and have the freedoms to come into the office. Now, of course, that has some issues and challenges when it comes to the logistics of maintaining a building, etc., etc. So, of course, this comes down to budgets and planning and everything else. But what I do know people are doing is surveying their employees to understand what works for them best. The other challenge is the fact that there are lots of people who have got new roles with organizations who live very far away because of what COVID created, and therefore remote is the best setup for them because they weren't able to find these opportunities outside of London, as an example. So employees need to think about, how does it impact those types of people? What proportion of individuals are affected by that, and how does it affect their bottom line or their stakeholders or the value that they're trying to provide? This isn't a clean-cut thing. This needs some thought. And so some people would say, well, the answer is just do remote. Why are we having this debate? The debate's being had because of how a culture is developed, how it affects burnout, isolation, and overproductivity, and the lack of delineation between rest and work and home and work. That's why this conversation is being had. Leaning into all of this, as I stated before, there is a human element that is being missed. And so there is a space potentially for this hybrid work to reignite, reintroduce this human element that gives organizations more of an edge. The AI, the automations can deal with the localized or minimized administration of things. And of course, there will be people affected, so to speak, over time. But there is still a human element that needs to be maintained. And that invariably requires people, maybe even potentially additional peoples to create that experience. We're living more or closer towards an experiential world where sensation is going to be important. Authenticity is going to be more important. Understanding those nuances are going to be important. And so you as a worker, you as an employee, you as a consultant or contractor can create that environment by observing what is required and providing that as a solution, whilst not ignoring the AI and automation to facilitate productivity or value and all these other things that are seen as good for an organization. CIPD talks about the fact that organizations that create a human-centric, well-placed level of positive well-being within the cultures of a workplace are going to attract top talent. One thing that top talent or any sort of talent, i.e. the workforce, look for, you have a good culture. And this comes through a number of ways: reviews, speaking to different employees, getting the vibe from maybe the interview panel, reading up online to see what this organization's like, what they focus on, what does their strategy say, doing a walk around in the environment. These are all ways in which you can find this out, but you can never truly know unless there are other people raving about these organizations. And so culture is going to be even more important. And that is something that at times remote work alone and/or AI/automation doesn't necessarily completely fill. But we have to remember, some people don't care about the remote elements. So just had to put that in there. So how do we put all of this together? Well, here are some things to think about. If we're thinking about remote work and we're thinking about AI and automation, you need to think to yourself, where am I currently right now? What have I been doing? And what do I need to do to position me in a space that enables me to like my job more? So do they have remote working opportunities? Is that something you want 100% of? Do you want that to be more 80-20, 60-40? Do you have to upskill? Is your current role so dependent on you, or can it be outsourced in some way, leveraging technology? Many knowledge workers are reliant upon a method or a framework, and so that can be imitated. Of course it can. However, the delivery of that may not necessarily be able to be imitated because that requires effort. And of course, one may talk about robotics in the future, but we're not fully there yet. And so how can you use AI to level up? How can you use automation to level up? This may not necessarily be from an organizational standpoint as an employee, but this may be from an individual standpoint. We all know what people are doing. They're going on ChatGPT, doing their prompts. They're creating a history of information centered around their work. And then they're using that prompt, or that return from the prompt, should I say, to formulate a response that they slightly change. That's a nice way to do it. Most people are doing that. What if you had a situation where after a call, that call is then transcribed and then it spits out a report or minutes or whatever it may be in your tone of voice, understanding your nuances in the way that it needs to be done, utilizing company brand, etc., and requires minimal change. That's the level of detail I'm talking to. So of course, it takes work or money to get to that level, but all is possible. So of course, that's understanding yourself, but you also have to understand your current organization. Let's say you're looking to stay where you're looking to stay. What is their thinking and their speed when it comes to AI and automation? What are their thoughts when it comes to their current workforce? Are they talking about redundancies? Are they talking about contracting the workforce? How does that affect you? So this is to say, you need to have a clear, strong idea of your value within the marketplace and what you're looking to do, the current positioning of your employer and what they're looking to do, and what does market sentiment looks like. Those are the 3 key things that you need to be focusing on to better prepare yourself for your next steps. Now, of course, there's one thing in terms of developing your AI and automation skills. But I think the next step is moving towards understanding what certain qualifications, vocational activities, and/or expertise or experience can you develop on the way. Because if you are using AI and automations, that requires you to have a good level of prompting. And so if you have good prompting stems from how you think about things. The meta prompt is more important, i.e. the prompt behind the prompt. That is your thinking, your thoughts, your ideas. And so if you have frameworks, if you have methodologies, if you have examples from other individuals that allow you to understand the space better, more powerful, way more powerful, because your prompting becomes more powerful and it accelerates that learning curve even more so. So what are things that you could learn and put into your arsenal that positions you in a strong position? Better yet, are there any emerging roles that are coming through that you could capitalize on? You could literally change the trajectory of your portfolio career in a positive light, riding this wave. So in this phase, this is more about understanding what's out there from the market. It's about speaking to different people and learning from them and then making implementations towards those changes. The final thing is, based on everything that you've amassed in terms of understanding yourself, the market sentiment and your employer, and also determining what opportunities are out there in terms of learning and speaking to different people, is there a way for you to expand your portfolio career in a way that benefits your desire on how to use AI and automation and also satisfy how you want remote working to look? Again, this video was never about bashing remote working or bashing AI and automation. This was more about seeing what is currently happening at the moment and understanding what does that mean for me, hence the back and forth. So if that portfolio career looks like, okay, actually, I want way more autonomy, I need to jump into contracting, then maybe that's something you think about. If it's telling you, actually, I don't want to jump into contracting, I'm worried about the market, let me just jump into a new organization, then that's what you need to focus on. If it's telling you, hey, actually, let me just stay where I am and maybe move either horizontally or vertically, then that's what you need to focus on. But do not let the market scare you to the point where you don't take any action. Yes, there are lots of people applying for stuff. Yes, it feels like there is less stuff out there because there is, but people are still getting roles. Now, this doesn't say that those people who are trying are not trying hard enough. This is not about hard enough. And sometimes it's not even about smart enough. There is a bit of luck involved in this as well. And so recognizing that the system is the system currently right now, you increase your luck with activity and quality. And those things combined with obviously hard work and smart work increases your luck. It's never been more competitive than it is now. And in some ways, this trend will continue. In some ways, it may get better and then get worse. And then we're just in a space where there is so much change happening. It's very difficult to have that level of sustainability from an employer standpoint. And this is why I've been talking about the portfolio career. This is why I've been talking about contracting. This is why I've been talking about independent consulting, because I'm recognizing we're going to have to warm up for something else. There isn't less money in the world. It's just pocketed elsewhere. Of course, the rich are getting richer and they're hoarding that stuff more. And so we have to find ways to bring that back into our pockets, whether that's through contracting, independent consulting, working in a 9-to-5, whatever it may be. So hopefully this has given you some insights in terms of where we're at when it comes to remote working and AI and automation and how to think about it and what you could do to better position yourself into a portfolio career that makes more sense for you. Again, we never want to be victims. Of course, we want to express how we feel. Of course, we can feel how we want to feel. But once we've had the opportunity to feel those things, we should also give ourselves the opportunity to make those changes as well. Of course, if you need support in developing a strong, robust CV, I have a free CV template below that you can check out, which has helped me over the years. This is exactly what I use. So if this is something you're interested in, then click on the link below to download that CV today. I'd love to know, what was the biggest takeaway from this session today? Let me know in the comments. And just in case you wanted to know, for my next video, I'm going to be talking about why working hard is not enough anymore. So if that's something you want to check out, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. And as always, my friends, understand, reach, and expand. Peace.